My father's 60th birthday party looked more like a corporate gala than a family celebration. The event was held at the most expensive hotel in the city. Crystal chandeliers glowed above perfectly arranged tables, and waiters moved around carrying trays of champagne. My father loved attention, and tonight he had plenty of it. Business partners, relatives, and wealthy friends filled the ballroom. Everyone wanted to congratulate the man who had built a real estate empire from almost nothing. At least, that was the story he liked to tell. My older brother Daniel stood proudly beside him, greeting guests like he already owned the company, which, according to my father, he eventually would. Daniel is the future of this family, my father said loudly to a group of investors nearby. He understands business. Daniel smiled confidently. He had worked in my father's company for years, managing luxury properties and large deals. Everyone respected him. Everyone except me. I arrived quietly, wearing a simple suit that suddenly felt very ordinary compared to the designer outfits around me. As soon as my father saw me, his expression changed slightly. "You made it," he said. His tone sounded more surprised than happy. "Of course," I replied. "It's your birthday." He nodded, but didn't hug me. My brother patted my shoulder quickly. "Hey," Daniel said casually before turning back to his conversation. Within seconds, I was standing alone again. I wasn't part of the business. Years ago, when I graduated from college, my father had offered me a job at his company. But there was one condition. "You start at the bottom," he told me at the time. "No special treatment." I agreed. For 2 years, I worked harder than anyone in the office. Long hours, late nights. But eventually I realized something important. It wasn't about earning respect. My father had already decided I would never get it. So I left the company and started my own small tech business. My father called it a mistake. "A real man works in real estate," he used to say. Tonight, he was making that opinion very public. After dinner, he stood up and tapped his glass. The room slowly grew quiet. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began proudly. "It means a lot to celebrate this milestone with the people who helped build my success." People clapped politely. Then he gestured toward my brother. "And, of course, the future of our family business." Daniel stepped forward as the guests applauded again. My father smiled proudly. "To show my appreciation," he continued, "I have a special gift for him." A staff member walked forward and handed Daniel a large envelope. Daniel opened it slowly. Then his eyes widened. "You're serious?" he asked. My father laughed. "Completely." Daniel pulled out the document and stared at it in disbelief. A luxury villa. Not just any property. One of the most expensive villas my father owned on the coast. The guests began clapping loudly. "Congratulations," someone shouted. Daniel hugged my father proudly. "You deserve it," my father told him. Then he glanced toward me. "And success should be rewarded." The words hung in the air. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. But my father wasn't finished. He looked directly at me, with a small smirk. "Of course," he added loudly, "not everyone in the family chose a successful path." A few guests shifted, awkwardly. But my father continued. "Some people prefer chasing little startup dreams instead of real businesses." A few people chuckled, quietly. Then he said the words that made the entire room turn toward me. "But that's fine." He raised his glass slightly. "Every family has somebody who ends up being a nobody." A few uncomfortable laughs spread across the room. My brother avoided eye contact. My father smiled like it was a harmless joke. I didn't say anything. Instead, I simply checked my phone. Because at that exact moment, a notification had just appeared on my screen. From Forbes. I stared at the notification for a second. At first, I thought it might be some random business article. But when I opened it, my chest tightened. The headline was simple: Top Young Tech Entrepreneurs Changing the Industry. And right there, near the top of the list, was my name. For a moment, the noise of the ballroom faded into the background. My father was still laughing with his guests. My brother was surrounded by people congratulating him on the villa. No one was paying attention to me, which honestly was nothing new. But tonight felt different. The article explained everything. Our startup, the same little dream my father used to mock, had just closed a massive partnership with an international company. The valuation had crossed $1.8 billion. And according to Forbes, I was one of the youngest founders behind it. I slowly locked my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Across the room, my father raised another toast. To hard work and real success, he said proudly. The guests applauded again. Then one of the investors sitting near him suddenly frowned while looking at his phone. "Wait," the man said quietly. Another guest leaned over. "What?" The investor turned his screen around. "Isn't that your other son?" My father looked confused. "What are you talking about?" The man stood up slightly and read the headline aloud. Forbes names rising tech billionaire among top entrepreneurs. The room started to grow quiet. Several people began pulling out their phones. My brother's smile slowly faded. My father frowned. "What nonsense is that?" But then someone else spoke up. "Wait, it's true." Another guest nodded. "I'm reading the same article." My father looked around the room as the conversations changed. People weren't talking about the villa anymore. They were talking about the Forbes article. And slowly, every single pair of eyes in the ballroom turned toward me. For a moment, the entire ballroom felt frozen. My father looked from one guest to another, clearly confused by the sudden shift in attention. "What are you all staring at?" he asked. One of the investors stepped closer to him and quietly handed over his phone. My father glanced down at the screen. The headline was impossible to miss. Forbes, Top Young Tech Entrepreneurs Changing the Industry. And right below it, my picture. For the first time that night, my father didn't have anything to say. His confident smile slowly disappeared as he read the article. Around the room, people began whispering. "His company is worth almost $2 billion. I had no idea he was that successful. Isn't he the quiet son?" My brother Daniel stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Even the guests who had been congratulating him moments ago were now glancing back and forth between us. Finally, my father looked up from the phone. His voice sounded much quieter now. This is real." I nodded calmly. "It was announced this morning." He blinked a few times, still trying to process it. "But you never told me." I shrugged slightly. "You were pretty clear about what you thought of my business." No one laughed this time. The same room that had laughed when he called me a nobody was now completely silent. My father slowly set the phone down on the table. For the first time in my life, he looked unsure of himself. Across the room, the guests were no longer crowding around Daniel. Instead, several of them were walking toward me. Investors, business partners, people who suddenly wanted to introduce themselves. My brother glanced at the envelope containing the villa papers in his hand. Then he looked back at me. The celebration had completely changed direction. I stood up from my chair and adjusted my jacket. Before walking away, I looked at my father one last time. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "Every family has somebody who becomes a nobody." I paused for a second. Then I added quietly, "Tonight just proved it wasn't me.